So hi everyone. I am Corinne and I work for Stillpoint. And this is actually one session out of the psychology and business ritual that will take place every month. And today we will interview June. I will interview June, who is a coach. I will let her actually present herself and tell you a little more about herself. So we're gonna talk about her journey, like her career as a coach and also an employee, and also trying to understand what mindful job hunting means, what we can do to take care of ourselves while being in this challenging process. Um, and yeah, I think most of you are part of the community already, so I don't think I have to repeat like the basic of what the community is all about. But I wanted to say that if there are other topics that you will be interested in exploring that are at the intersection of psychology and business, you can always just write me in the community, and I'll be happy to yeah address it. Look for people to talk about it. But I just want to give a few 1 minute for June to present herself.
1 minute. Okay.
Oh no, this is a rough minute. You don't need to use the whole minute. No, but
So
just
funny. It's my heart's beating. It's like I've been on a. Normally, I'm the one on the interview panel interviewing people being interviewed. It's been many years, so it's kind of feel like I've been put on the spot. But good afternoon, everybody. I'm June, connecting from Berlin, Germany. So I'm currently known as a staff care coach and mentor. I'm also a human resources consultant, mainly working in the non-profit sector, in humanitarian aid and international development. And yeah, so I'm based in Berlin, and I work mainly for organizations to support staff members, basically, because that's humanitarian aid. It's for frontline workers who are working overseas in emergency or non-emergency operations and supporting them through that process. Emotionally, and also work on strategies on mental health, good practices in the workplace, closely work with HR department, as well as individual clients. So that's a little bit myself. Oh, and also I've extended support to family members. I can say a little bit about that also as well, because I've been sat on each side, sat in HR department where I've recruited and deployed, but I've also been the one deployed as an expat, and also have followed my partner, my husband then, as an expat sort of spouse, and very little support was also given to accompanied family members as well. So I extend support to families as well.
thank you. I wanted to ask you, as you worked with HI employee as a start, what are the challenges that usually people in this position face? You will say, like, probably the main challenges that they face.
From HR point of view, you mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
From HR point of view, well, of course, it's well, I can really talk about my own experience working in the humanitarian sector, and I mainly work in emergencies, and that's just basically 24/7, where we need people yesterday. That's like what we say, and so there's yeah, a lot of sort of stress and pressure with matching, finding profiles or specific profiles. Namely also with language skills as well, because we work in all regions around the world. So it's really the constant matching process and sending people out. And of course, when it's an emergency, we can't let people stay too long due to burnout. So for emergencies, sometimes we have to replace staff every 6 weeks. So that can be quite stressful, and also dealing with the mental health of our staff, potentially from burnout, fatigue, maybe poor relationship with their supervisors, with management. And I'm sure it's not only in the non-profit sector or in the organizations I worked, I think it's across the board as well. That's, I would say, yeah, namely that. Yeah, I'm sure there's more retention as well. It's also difficult if people are really burnt out or find that they need to end their assignments earlier. It also could be due to family members who don't settle or culturally adapt, that assignments get sort of terminated earlier as well. So it's really that matching and deploying process, as well as in our sector, everything is dependent on funding as well. So if funding is reduced or dried up, then of course there's a whole process of redundancy then we have to go through, and that can be really emotionally difficult for the staff.
And how do you see this impacting like the whole recruiting process? Because usually HR, they're kind of like the first point of contact to the company, depending if the company is big enough and they have an HR team, otherwise it could be the direct team. But how do you see this impacting the recruiting process as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, from HR, we're not very popular, to be honest, by so-called business or the operations. So it's another internal challenge is really the internal partnerships and that we have with the departments that we deploy our staff with, because of course for HR it's about having a fair and transparent process. It can happen that somebody is introduced from somewhere, from outside, or contact through a particular staff member, but of course if it doesn't match the competencies or the job profile or the job description that we are looking for, it can be very, very difficult, and obviously in the long term financially damaging as well if the right profile is not fit for the right position. So there's it can be quite challenging in terms of going through that whole proper process without it being properly fair and transparent. And of course, HR is usually audited internally, externally as well. So we need to be able to prove that the process was done fairly.
And when it comes to when you first introduced to me at least the term of like mindful job hunting, what would you say, what would be your definition of it, like if someone is actually searching for a job?
Thanks, Corinne. That's a really valuable question. What I noticed was really during the pandemic and the lockdown, because I work in HR and I've done recruitment for many years. So I had personal direct friends who actually lost their jobs because of COVID, have been laid off. There were also networks of contacts brought to me for people, who were fearing that they might be next, basically, because they could see other organizations downsizing. So I noticed there was a lot of sort of active workshops and tutorials on YouTube, some really brilliant ones as well, really focusing on CV and interview skills and things like that. And for me, I mean, it's all good, and I just decided not to take that approach. And for me, because I studied mental health in the workplace, and I have a strong interest in staff care and staff well-being, for me, it's really taking that the backstage to see what actually happens in the back scenes of the mind when we go through a job hunting process, because it's just panic, it's rush. I don't want to lose my job. That's how people identify themselves with. It's a huge part of everyone's life, obviously. So being employed for one day and the next day being unemployed, it's a huge blow to your confidence, to your self-esteem, and how you present yourself to other people. So for me, there was a more priority of making sure that we can't change the fact that you can find a job tomorrow. I'm not there to help you find that dream job tomorrow, but what I can help you with is to really manage the stress, manage the emotions going through that, and taking a calm and deep sort of focus on the self, and using the opportunity to actually question ourselves what we can do when we are outside of a job, if we are unemployed or if we are made redundant, what opportunities can this crisis bring to us in return. So that's more the approach I've taken towards job hunting.
And actually it's happening, and it keeps on happening. I mean, I feel like it's just gonna be like a just continuous process. For those who are not in Berlin, we have actually at the moment a big delivery company that is called Gorillas that has recently laid off half of its staff, but there are also other companies that did so. And I know that this is creating like a sort of panic within the startup, let's say, industry, that people are actually wondering, wow, like they were big and really successful. What about us? So what is interesting is that even for people that are still not looking for a job, but they're probably also thinking, this could happen to me. So this is like this sense of panic being spread out everywhere. And I wanted to ask you, for someone, let's say, that just got laid off, like what would you recommend to be like the first step, actually, like just like, because I've been in that actually space where I was just like CV, just sending, but this is obviously not sustainable. So what would you advise?
Yeah, so with the situation of redundancy, what I've seen quite a lot is there's still a lot of emotions attached to the company or the organization that's laid this individual off without. It really depends how well the redundancy was managed, if it was communicated, but sometimes it can happen overnight, you know. So I've seen redundancy made without proper explanation. It's you know, very poor package, severance package are offered one day to another. So I've had clients come to me talking about, I need a job now. And in fact, the focus is still on the grief, actually, or on the anger, still with the organization, with I don't understand, why me, why not that person. And so that will be actually carried on to the next job as well, and it will actually show often the times, and actually subconsciously, maybe not for the person or the applicant, because the focus is so much on finding the job and finding the CV. But often it can happen that the person does not get through the interview because you can actually see there's a sense of instability, or the mind is somewhere else, it's not very focused, and there's still some grief that has been carried on from the last job. And I think it's really important to, especially, you know, if you are the ones who've been working nearly all your life and not used to having a gap, or not being out of work, we kind of run on this so-called hamster wheel, or we, you know, because that's what we're used to, it's our comfort zone, it's what we know, we know what we normally do. And so it's really taking that big courage to step out of that hamster wheel and to see beyond that wheel, that there is actually life outside that wheel, and to explore a little bit, and to take a step back and you know, flip the mindset to, wow, all these years I've been kind of stuck in this organization, and now I may not have anything, but having nothing means everything else becomes possible. And that's the space I like to bring people to, because it begins an exploration of the things that we never had time for, or the, you know, what matters to me, or the people that I want to spend my life with, my age, my health, what is really important to me now. So the biggest challenge is to really get the people out of that hamster wheel, and to really kind of let go and trust yourself to say, maybe it's not bad to kind of be out of work, so to speak, because it for the first time, it will give me a chance to actually explore all different possibilities that I have in front of me.
So it's actually about, like, would you say that it's about changing the mindset, or like not necessarily the mindset, but maybe like the story that you tell yourself about what happened? Like, because I would imagine that when you get laid off, you would probably see that something negative. and that you will feel maybe like life is kind of out of control, something happened to you. But like if the perception is more, well, this happened, and now I have this opportunity instead of like the lack. So like, I wonder if is this also work about like reframing maybe like the situation or the event?
So there's a Marcia Linear, she's a American psychologist, which she talks about radical acceptance. So there were just simply things in life that we have that happens that beyond our control. You know, it could be illness, it could be breakup, it could be rejection, it could be a loss of a loved one or loss of a job. And this is a fact of life that happens, and we have no control over the job that we want. You know, we go through a process of an interview, but in the end, it's the organization that wants to hire us. So that's the typical sort of perception that we have, and so absolutely, it's all about changing that mindset of saying, well, actually, going into an interview is actually equal. We're equal partners. I'm going to the interview to also assess this organization. So it can also happen that one gets an offer and realize, actually, after the interview and all the assessments and the tests, it just wasn't a good fit for me, and there are people who've actually declined an offer. And to be able to do that, you know, takes courage, maturity, but of course it's about knowing yourself well as well, and having that sort of confidence in yourself to say, yes, I may be losing a job which is really good pay, but you know, am I ready to spend my next 5-10 years in a job that I may not be happy with, when I could be finding something else that's more meaningful, that really speaks to me. So it's definitely about that mindset that we need to take, and to also accept the fact that there are things we cannot always control. But again, maybe you've heard this a lot, it's about how you react to that situation. So it's about being super aware, and that's what mindfulness is about, is being super aware about yourself and trusting yourself. Sometimes you just have to let go and be vulnerable, and practice to be in that space of vulnerability. And by doing that, you actually practice courage at the same time. We don't hear about that a lot, but when you actually sit in that space of vulnerability, you practice courage. And if you practice that repetitively, then you feel more confident, and then you're able to actually, be the one to reject, not accept an offer. Or another way, analogy I like to look is, if you can just imagine somebody with a butterfly net. Okay, so he's going into the woods, he's hunting for the butterfly. You've got this beautiful butterfly that's flapping its wings and trying to fly away. And my question will be, to you, who are you? Are you that butterfly, or are you the man with the net hunting for that job, being the butterfly? Or are you that butterfly who is being hunted by the employer, by the company? Because it's a choice. If you want to be that butterfly to be hunted, then it requires time for you to make yourself beautiful, to put yourself on that radar, to show yourself, and that takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes a lot of practice of courage and vulnerability. So yeah, it really is about the shift in mindset, and how you deal with that same time that you could be, tirelessly panicking, filling in applications for CVs, or taking a step back and saying, hey, I've got this time now. I finally want to do the things I could never do. And yes, the trade-off is I may not have a stable salary for the next 6 months, and can I deal with it with a severance package that I have, and really see the result after 6 months or 3 months already.
Have you seen differences when it comes to like the support system? Because I would imagine that maybe, let's say for someone that is single, just starting life. So I got into that phase. I had a phase where I was unemployed, getting started, left a startup that was failing, had a student loan, was on my own, basically. So I find it, and no severance, all of that, not all of that. So like, I know that at that time, you would have told me butterfly mindfulness, I would have been, okay, June, like, cool. Like it would have just not stick, like definitely not. So I wonder also how much, let's say, age, class, support system, or like money in the bank, like helps you get into just maybe even the concept of like mindfulness. Can everybody just afford to be mindful? I don't know if it's a provocative question, but I was thinking of that.
I mean, again, mindfulness is really about being, again, self-aware and helping you make the decisions that are important for you. And yeah, sometimes it's a trade-off against other things that maybe mean that are more important to us than maybe money. But of course, you know, we need to pay the bills. Of course, there are debts and loans that maybe we need to pay back. So, you know, there are lots of people who are struggling to barely meet the needs. So the question here will be, you know, okay, what kind of job then? Is it just, well, I mean, is it a job that you need financially to pay the bills, or is it like the dream job that you're working towards? And how could that be? How could there be balance? How could that be even combined? Would it be possible that you take a part-time job to be able to pay the bills and then use the other time to invest in yourself, in the things that really matter to you, or on the subject that you want to really build your competencies in that dream job? So it's also making smart decisions over how best you can use the time, and not necessarily having to choose either one or the other, and exploring the possibilities of combining both or more than different options, so that there's also enough time for yourself that could later contribute to that dream job that you eventually want, while having some kind of income to be able to pay the bills. Yeah.
Makes sense. I just want to read Ben's comment because I think it's interesting. He said, I have sometimes thought of jobs as similar to relationships. I was out of work for 6 months a few years ago. Going into an interview for a new job is like going on a date. If I am not ready and have not moved on from my previous job, I may not be able to show the best of what I can offer. The same comparison in seeing the interview as a two-way process.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a relationship, going on a date, and the rejection. I mean, rejection is really hard hit. It's terrible, isn't it? Rejection can be done in a job, it can be done in a relationship. And yeah, it's deeply painful, it's hurtful, and it can really you know, impact your well-being and your confidence for your next job. Yeah, so that's where I really question on, before you get back on that wagon wheel or that hamster wheel, it's really about, you know, trying to stop and pause and really think about taking a big step back and thinking wisely how you can best use your time effectively. If it means that you need to be out for a few months to work on yourself, that is kind of a risk, yes, but I believe it does pay off in the long run, because I have seen in interviews people come and not focused, not answering the questions, the answers also are not really to the point. I also often hear general answers, where I like to actually hear answers on, you know, what did you actually do, whereas a lot of answers are general answers. Yeah, one should do this, one should do that, and it comes across very obvious actually in the interview when someone hasn't come prepared or not in the right sort of mindset. And yeah.
There's a question in the chat. Do you have a formula for making smart decisions?
A formula making smart decisions. I wouldn't say formula, but there is this 4-question kind of what you call it? Would that be a framework that actually came across in one of my coaching trainings? So if you take the first letter of the word life, so LIFE, and to kind of help you make your decisions if you are out of work and wanting to make the decisions for your next step. So I would ask you these 4 questions, and L would be lifestyle. So and really answer the ideal. So what would be your ideal lifestyle? What will that actually look like? You know, in terms of environment, in terms of distance, commute, what will that lifestyle look like? And that second question is then, you know, how would that serve you? How would that benefit you in terms of your own well-being, in terms of your own stress, with your own health and relationship with others? So the L is, what would be your ideal lifestyle and how would that serve you? I will be impact. And same question, what kind of impact would you like to make? Specifically to who? You know, sometimes I'm a parent, so of course the impact, the legacy I leave behind would be for my daughter. And so what kind of impact do you want to make sort of in your life, and to who? And again, how would that serve you? F will be for financial. Again, what would be your ideal kind of financial lifestyle look like in terms of earning, the amount that you need for the necessary bills, to have some extras to go on holidays or not? So what would be your ideal kind of financial sort of bandwidth be like? And again, how would that serve you in your lifestyle to live comfortably? And E would be emotions. So that's really for yourself with your emotional management. What kind of emotions would you like to have in your next step, in your next life? What sort of feelings do you want to have? How do you like to be? What will make you feel alive? What will make you feel amazing and yourself again and confident again? So really tap into that space where you really felt yourself. And often we talk about the inner child as well. What are the things that really you enjoyed as a child? I mean, I'm into music. I mean, I always like dancing and singing, and being Japanese, you know, being brought up singing karaoke. And then the first thing I did when I lost my husband, I was ill, diagnosed with cancer, I had lost my job. First thing I did, I picked up my guitar. After 20 years, I started singing. So there is that something about that brings you into your that inner child and joy, and give you that feeling of joy again in life. And and again, how would that serve you? So it's the LIFE life model that you could use, if that's helpful.
There's a super good framework. I was taking notes for myself. Do you already see a shift when it comes to this relationship between employer and employee? I feel like it's already changing a little more with the different generation, that maybe because people are asking themselves a little more, am I happy in this job? Which I feel like probably in my parents' generation wasn't really, I don't think they were asking themselves so much question about the job. Whereas now I feel like at least my generation and the one after is really like, I want a job that also fulfills me. And so I feel like this what I will say, this unequal relationship, or uneven, is changing. And I feel like now even companies have to make way more effort and have to understand that they need to make themselves attractive more than people have to be like, okay, I need to. I mean, it's on both sides, but I feel like now companies understand this a little more. And I was wondering if you've also felt the same way, or observed the same trend.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a generation where, you know, I worked in real structured organizations, hierarchy, you respect the rules, you come on time, this is how it is. And you know, so I think that's one of the challenges we have when we work with millennials, for example, who like their freedom, like to come when they they want and have their own, you know, thinking and their choice in over decisions making. And so there can be clear clash. And maybe some of you, all of you probably know, Simon Sinek. He actually talks about the millennials and how they are never happy anywhere, and they quit their jobs every 6 months, and it's just yeah, this sense of entitlement or privilege, he calls it. Yeah, I think it is a different generation, isn't it? I think, and you know, going even a generation back to my mother's generation, you know, you should be thankful already to have a job, and you never answer back, or you should never question. And you know, those were the days back then. I think with the current generation, there was a lot more, yeah, a sense of asking, well, I don't know, asking for more. I don't know if it really is entitlement, but yeah, it still seems to take longer to feel that sense of satisfaction, and so it's difficult to kind of find then that long-term stability. I find, so that's, I think, is a specific challenge, I think, for the millennial generation. This is what I've noticed, at least. Yeah.
I want to slowly, I mean, some people are already asking questions in the chat, which is amazing. Are there any questions from anyone else on that topic? Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, hi, thank you. I've been really thinking about the subject of this since it was posted, because like other people were saying, just as I arrived, you don't necessarily think about mindfulness in job hunting. And also kind of reflecting on what Corinne was saying, that I've had a few jobs where my kind of, over time, my visceral reaction to being there became so clear that I had to leave. You know, almost like if I were mindful, I would have noticed earlier in a sense, but it sort of developed into a sense of dread. And when I left one of my early jobs, I really identified that feeling and said to myself, if I ever have that feeling again, I know I shouldn't, I should identify it 6 months ago, basically. But I love this idea that maybe it's the same strategy in a sense, but from the start, you know, like you say, when you go to the interview, you walk away from the interview and you have a sense already, right? And it feels like a very proactive way. I don't know how predictive it is, I guess, but it sounds like a really proactive way to maybe reduce your risk if you bring that level of awareness into that whole process to, you know, like Ben was saying, do I want to be in this relationship or not from the very, very start? So I guess generally it's more of a comment than a question. But no, here's the question. So if we were to make that a practical strategy, yeah, what are the highlights, would you say? Like, what do you need to hold closely to ensure that you're also making a choice, I guess, if you're able to?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron, for that question. I think, again, going back to sitting in with that vulnerability and taking and practicing courage, because it's a huge, brave step to say, I'm quitting, you know, without having any uncertainty for another job. But if you feel it so strongly, and I think there's been a rise in also people questioning about their jobs and feeling really unhappy in their career during the lockdown, because people have had more time to think about that, you know, because once you're in the job again, you're on that rat wheel again, you're on that hamster wheel, and you're on pilot mode, so you don't really have to think about the other things. But I think the pandemic somehow has happened to us for a reason, and I think the pandemic has also allowed us to slow down and to think and to reflect. And so I've had also quite a few people contacting me saying, I am in a job, but I know I'm not happy. I feel I need a change. I don't know what change, I don't know how to start, but I kind of need that help to find clarity. So that's where I do a lot of my career coaching, where I really ask questions about, again, so what's important for you? It's really the person centered, putting the center of attention on the person, on what's important for you. And another analogy that I like to use is just imagine yourself as an astronaut, you know, in space and looking down on planet Earth and just realizing, you know, is where am I in this huge planet and my problems? Is this really a big problem that I want to, that's worth stressing my next life, you know, with the time that I'm alive on planet, or are there more important, beautiful things that I should be focusing on? And my mother has this beautiful quote in saying happiness is actually about the things you can't buy with money. And what is that? It's health, it's family, it's relationships, it's friendships. Jobs these days, I don't know if you can buy, but it's really looking at the things that are important to you in life. And sometimes we need to really zoom out and to make us see and have that breakthrough moment on realizing, oh my goodness, I've been in this tunnel so focused on the everyday things that I've actually missed out that there are many other things. There is actually life outside this job as well. And again, it does take courage and sitting in with that vulnerability. But that can actually bring you really far in your decisions. So I'm doing, I think I will say at the end, because I'm actually doing a group coaching program right now, really specific on the fears, because a lot of people want to feel happy and joyful again, but they're just stuck with blocks and hurdles. And so I keep hearing the words, I can't move forward because of fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of not being liked, fear of not being able to find a job again. And it's all about how you overcome these fears. And so so I offer this group coaching program where we focus on, okay, let's practice letting go of our fears and being vulnerable in the present moment. And that's not easy, but it takes practice. So that will be a strategy, part of a mindful strategy to navigate that process. That answers your question, Aaron.
I partly, I'm kind of like, I'm wondering at that beginning, it makes sense inside it somehow, but when you're doing the hunting bit, but I think in the end, when you talked about fear, that's probably the thing that gets in the way of people feeling that they have the choice to look around, or the choice to say no, or the choice to negotiate for a higher salary or a different kind of role, or all of, you know, it doesn't feel like that's a choice opportunity. But I suppose if you're not being guided by fear, or you're not being rigid, suddenly possibilities open. Thank you.
Thank you.
More questions?
I was just wondering, how far would you extend the concept of mindfulness to encompass the two-way process, thinking about Ben's comment about an interview being a little bit like a relationship, or more so your employment being more like a relationship, but certainly thinking in terms of an interview being a two-way process, how far would you extend that mindfulness in terms of my needing to be as aware of as possible as to how the panel are answering my questions, such as, are they answering a different question? Are they being evasive? Things like that.
So again, I would say, are you going to the interview really to serve the panel? Are you ready to really put your true self, your authentic self aside, to adjust yourself to meet the panel, so that you can have that job, that security, and that financial, let's say, security, over a job that may not necessarily bring you that joy or happiness? So there is kind of a lot of work, I think, that needs to be done on being clear, I think, before you go in an interview, on being clear with yourself, what sort of job, and what does this job bring to me, rather than what can I do to serve them? Because I think that's how society is brought, that you know, we are expected to adjust ourselves to meet the needs of the of society, or the professional sort of world that we are going into. So the shift is really shifting up to putting yourself first, and what is it do I need for myself, and how does it benefit me in the long run, and how is that going to make me happy in the long run? How's that going to help me towards my growth, rather than serving somebody else on the things that might not actually make me happy. Does that make sense, Ian?
Yes. I was also thinking in terms of how would one maintain the focus on not just on oneself, what I'm doing, what I'm saying, how I'm coming across, how I need to convey myself, but how do I maintain a focus on the panel in that highly pressured situation, in terms of what they're saying, what they're doing. So the focus is as much on them as it is on me, in terms of are there any kind of tells or reveals in terms of them not answering my questions, or being evasive, or not answering questions very fully. I know this is a really long question, sorry. In summation, something I think I'm trying to ask you something along the lines of, how would I go about maintaining a focus on the panel as much as the panel are focused on me? If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to understand that question, where that's coming from when you say focus more on the panel, on whether you're actually answering the question, if it's answering the question that they are the answers that they are looking for. Is it I think it's, when we talk about two-way, it's really having a conversation. So it's like having a conversation with a friend or somebody you meet on a date in a relationship. So if the conversation doesn't flow, you either feel it. Yeah, if you get the question and then you're answering according to your understanding, if there's a good conversation going, that's actually a good sign that, you know, maybe this interview is actually going well, but maybe in the end they don't take you because somebody else is fits the position better. Okay, that can happen, but I mean, that would be a sign. If I feel there's no conversation really flowing, that will be the point where you will be in the interview panel to say, then this conversation is actually not flowing. Maybe I should question myself if this is really the organization I want to work for. So it's really, again, listening to your gut feeling and trusting yourself and your intuition. Again, like in any relationship, if you're with somebody and you just don't feel it, there's no connection, it's lost, it's the same thing. And then you have to ask yourself, well, do I want to continue in such a relationship that's not really going to serve me? And I think that same principle could be applied when you go into an interview. That answers your question, Ian?
Mm-hmm. It does, thank you.
Just mindful of the time. Is there like a last question for June?
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And
yes.
Hi, Ben.
hi. I was wondering, you were earlier on, you were talking about how Gorillas is laying off a lot of people in Berlin, and with a lot of these gig economy companies, a lot of people may not necessarily just have one job, but they may be in contract with multiple different organizations and seeing what becomes available, maybe on a weekly basis even, or even on a daily basis. I was thinking, is there somehow you see that might mindfulness can be relevant in that context? And because if I were to think of myself in that position, I may not necessarily in the beginning, when I'm trying to get all of these different jobs, necessarily think about how it might impact my life and my psychological well-being, but going through that and going through the uncertainty of the jobs that are changeable from day to day and may not necessarily provide that financial security. I'm just wondering, what's your perspective on that?
So the question for me or for Corinne?
For you, June.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, to have, so if I understood well, how you can navigate the mindfulness by taking multiple jobs.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a strategy, and there's no right and wrong. If that serves you, and you know, it's kind of like having your eggs in different basket and testing and trying, why not? I mean, I really welcome that, because it is about feeling, it is about finding your place somewhere, and if it doesn't work out in one place, then you know, why stay there? So then you have that backup plan B with some part-time income going. So I think that's a workable strategy, as long as you are kind of in control of that process. And it does require then, you know, dividing your time in different places with different people. And if you're good at juggling that, that's great. But if that becomes a stress for you, then it will be good to be aware of that as well, and then refocus then on the strategy that will make it less stressful, because it's always not good to focus on too many things, because then it's difficult then to narrow it down, and that could actually make it harder on finding out what you actually want to do and good at. And also another thing I've noticed is when you've been in one particular technical area, whether it's finance or accounting, and then you realize, for example, I'm HR, but I had to do a lot of administration as well. It was and I ended up taking more administration HR jobs, because that's just what shows on my CV. And it also has to be a point where you say, I don't want to be doing any more administration anymore. So it's very easy to kind of fall into the same job, because that's what you've been doing, that's what you know. But if it doesn't bring you that joy and satisfaction, it's also good then again to step off that hamster wheel and say, hang on, maybe I won't do administration, but focus more on HR. And that's where you can again go through that smart thinking process and strategy planning. Does that help, Ben?
Yeah, partly, but actually the direction you took your answer was actually more interesting, so thank you.
Okay. So maybe I just say also, it was a big decision for me to leave. 17 years of solid working, and I basically burnt out in my last job, and it affected my time with my family, my daughter, my health obviously as well. And that was a moment where I really had to step out and say, I need to leave. And that's led me to a 2-year journey where I was not in a job. And I tell you, it was the most challenging, but I think it was the most rewarding time, because that's where the mindfulness really kicked in for me, where I was able to rest, recuperate, recover, find myself again. And then right now I'm on my own journey with the decision to set up my own company and go freelancing, be the one to control who I want to work with, what time I want to work with. And yes, it brings less income, but I'm in a much happier place. So I will end it on that note.
Thank you, June. Thank you, everyone.